Elon Musk, the richest man on the planet, really thinks he's untouchable, but he's wrong. Let me tell you why and how he will end up losing absolutely everything. The so-called billionaire genius is throwing up very questionable salutes at conferences, attacking minorities, and even spreading disinformation on Twitter. But what if I told you that it's not a matter of if he'll fail, but when? Let me explain why. There's a famous quote, absolute power corrupts absolutely. But in my opinion, it doesn't just corrupt, it destroys. Those of us that live in the UK know that, like Elon Musk, there was a man once upon a time called Boris Johnson. He was supposedly untouchable after winning a landslide victory in a general election. He became Prime Minister in 2019 and was having the time of his life. So if Elon Musk wants to learn anything from anyone about his foray into British politics, as he's so desperate to get into, then I think he needs to take one big lesson from Mr. Johnson. In 2019, all seemed well for Boris. He was smiling, happy, Prime Minister. He fulfilled his dream. After that election in 2019, Boris, and unfortunately many of us, thought he'd be around for a very long time. It really seemed like nothing could faze him, whether it was giving out dodgy COVID contracts or so many scandals about MPs getting involved in things they should never have been involved in and that Boris obviously knew about, let alone the fact that these PPE contracts he was giving out during COVID were allegedly blatant corruption. But the thing is, Boris took it a step too far. He decided that he thought he was so untouchable during the COVID lockdown, he could have a party in 10 Downing Street. And not just one party, multiple parties. And you might be thinking, well, what's wrong with that? Well, at a time in the UK, there were rules which meant that you couldn't leave your house. You couldn't go see your grandma who was potentially dying. You couldn't even go to some funerals for some people. And these were mandated by Boris Johnson himself. He was so involved in his own ego and believed his source that deeply that he really thought he could get away with it. But when it came to it and people found out that Boris had lied to them the entire time, that's it. It brought down his entire career. So-called Partygate destroyed a man who just a few years before was one of the most powerful men in the UK.
I want to apologise. I know that millions of people across this country have made extraordinary sacrifices over the last 18 months. I know the anguish that they have been through, unable to mourn their relatives, unable to live their lives as they want or to do the things they love. And I know the rage they feel with me and with the government I lead.
The idea that someone could act believing that there were no consequences is exactly what made the British people revoke that mandate they gave him in 2019 and put so much pressure on him he was forced to resign. And that's what Elon Musk needs to learn. Once the people have turned on you, once your popularity declines overnight, that's it. Your time is up. You don't decide it, the people do. Elon Musk is going down the same track as Mr. Boris. You see, he gave a $200 million donation to Donald Trump in order for him to win his presidential campaign. And in return, Trump's made him head of his own government department, the Department for Government Efficiency, also known as DOGE. So now he's firing tens of thousands of federal workers, innocent people who have had nothing to do with his political disagreements or his political opponents, just to justify keeping on the billions of dollars he's got worth of contracts with the US government, all in the name of saving waste. That $200 million donation sounds like a really good bribe to me. Musk is making himself richer and forcing others to suffer and laughing about the prospect on his own social media platform. He obviously feels like nothing will take him down. But I think what Musk forgets is that Trump, not him, won the election because people voted for him, not because of how amazing he or Trump is. It's because people lent them that vote. And just as that authority was lent to them by the American people, it can just as easily be taken away. And I think knowing that is the difference between Musk and Trump, and why Elon Musk will fall far harder than his mate in the Oval Office. You see, in 2020, when Trump lost, and although he didn't admit he lost, he didn't take it very well, and it led to the riots of 2020, where people stormed the US Capitol building, risking US politicians and US democracy itself. You could tell that the loss, the idea that people no longer trusted Trump, really hurt him deep inside. He couldn't take it because he'd never had that feeling before. The idea that people can take something away from you. That's what democracy is all about. And that's what billionaires and the top 1% fundamentally don't understand. They don't get it. That's their inevitable downfall. So Trump knows better than anyone. If you take people's vote for granted, just like Elon Musk is doing now, making jokes, performing on stage, taking the mick out of people who have lost their jobs, you will be made to look stupid in one way or another. And since Elon has never won any election at all, he has no idea that it's not your ego that brings you to power. It's the people that push you there in the first place. And that reality is going to hit him like a wrecking ball. So how exactly will Elon Musk fail? Here's what I think will happen, and I'm pretty certain it will happen in this order. First is that people across the US, and across the world really, that are frustrated with Musk, but mainly in the US, those who have lost their jobs or those that are feeling the pinch of his cuts to social services, will turn on him and the Trump administration. And that inevitably will put really significant pressure on Trump and Musk's relationship. And since we know that Trump only cares about one thing, Trump, he will get rid of Musk when his ego gets too big. And that moment is fast approaching. And the funny thing is, it's happened before. This is what Trump said about Elon Musk in 2022. When Elon Musk came to the White House asking me for help on all of his many subsidized projects, whether it's electric cars that don't drive long enough, driverless cars that crash, or rocket ships to nowhere, without which subsidies he'd be worthless, and telling me how he was a big Trump fan and Republican, I could have said, drop to your knees and beg, and he would have done it. That quote from Trump shows you that this won't just be a nasty breakup like you see in the films. This will be a knockout blow to Elon Musk's projects and financial empire. That's because Trump, annoyingly, is actually right. Musk's wealth is tied to taxpayer money. He's heavily reliant on billions and billions of dollars worth of taxpayer subsidies, not just in the US, by the way, but in the UK too, and across the world. These subsidies, i.e. money from us, the taxpayer, keep his businesses and himself afloat. According to federal data analysed by The Independent, Musk's own companies have been promised or awarded nearly $21 billion by the US government since 2018. And that's just a small portion of it. The reason he's so desperate to prove that he's cutting waste in the US government is because he and his billionaire friends are the biggest waste, and his job is to distract people from realising that, hence why he's making such a big show of it. So we've learnt today that those that abuse power will inevitably fall on their own sword. They cause their own demise because their ego gets too big, they think they can take it a step too far, they think they can take that extra $1 billion of subsidies, they think they can have that party during COVID, they think they can take away democracy altogether in the case of Trump in 2020, but at the end of the day, that step too far is what will cause people to turn. And when people do turn, as they say, the bigger they are, the harder they fall. These people aren't gods. They're a placeholder. We put them there. And when we decide we've had enough of them, they're out. Their fall is pretty dramatic. Billionaires don't own us. It's the other way around. So the next time you think that Elon Musk or any other billionaire for that matter is untouchable, think again.